Chances are you didn't even know this happened. On July 18, 2026, a private Indian company launched a rocket into orbit for the first time ever. No cricket match got cancelled for it, no theaters played it before the movie trailers. Most of the country went about a normal Saturday. But if you were on X that day, or watching a live stream at 12:05 in the afternoon, you would have seen something building, a small but real crowd glued to a countdown waiting for one word from mission control. Confirmed. A rocket built by a company that didn't exist 10 years ago had reached space on its first try. Not a government program. A company started by a couple of engineers who walked away from secure jobs to build something nobody had asked them to build. This wasn't signing a movie deal or walking out to bat in a T20 final. Get this wrong, and it's not a bad review or a bad score. It's years of your life gone in front of everyone. They built it anyway. And 17 minutes after liftoff, that bet made India only the third country on Earth after the United States and China, where a private company has pulled this off entirely on its own. This is the story of how that happened. And it starts with a locked door and ends with a rocket breaking through it. For 6 decades, there was exactly one way to launch something into space from Indian soil. Any launch needs ISRO, the state space agency that put India on the moon and pushed a dream across millions of miles to Mars on a shoestring budget. ISRO was brilliant, but here is the catch. ISRO was also the only option. I repeat, ISRO was the only door. Why does this matter? Let's say if you're an engineer with an idea for a rocket, there was nowhere to take it, no license to apply for it, no private launch pad to lease, no path. If you want to reach orbit, you had no choice but ISRO. Good news is, in 2020, the door cracked open. The Indian government rewrote the rules, creating a new authority called Space, whose entire purpose was to let private companies build what only the state used to build. Suddenly, there was a path, not an easy one, but a real one. And here comes 2 former scientists from the Indian Space Research Organization waiting on the other side of that door. You heard it right, a startup out of Hyderabad founded 2 years earlier by a pair of former ISRO scientists who had decided the future of Indian spaceflight shouldn't belong to one organization alone. They called it Skyroot. In 2022, Skyroot took its first real swing, a small rocket, one stage, spin stabilized, built to prove a single point, that a private Indian company could design, build and fly something that actually left the ground and reached space. They named the mission Prarambh, the beginning. It worked. The rocket flew, touched space and came back down having answered its only question. But it couldn't do the one thing that actually matters in this industry. It couldn't put anything into orbit. It was a proof of concept, not a business. Everyone in that room knew the real test was still ahead of them. It would take 4 more years to get there. Here is what 4 years of engineering work actually looks like. 3 solid fuel stages, stacked and restacked through test after test, each one designed to survive forces that would tear apart almost anything else humans build. On top of them, a 4th stage. This one liquid fueled, engineered for one job only: precision. Why does it matter? Because the difference between success and failure in space isn't just about power, it's about precision. One wrong move and you have got a multi-million-dollar failure. Instead of giving up, they kept testing. And when it came time to choose a name, they chose Vikram-1. The moment I read it, I understood what could have inspired these young scientists because it made perfect sense. Vikram-1 was ISRO's first chairperson, the physicist who built India's space program from almost nothing. And this rocket was being built the same way, from scratch, by people willing to stake years of their lives on whether it would fly. Of course, the financial reality was different. I'm not comparing Sarabhai's situation with these young scientists Pawan Kumar and Naga Bharath. By May 2026, Skyroot had raised $60 million, built on a production line, and crossed $1 billion valuation, the first Indian space company to get there. Now, it was time to find out if the bet on them would really pay off. Launch day does not go smoothly. Just 5 minutes before liftoff, engineers catch a technical issue. The countdown freezes. Somewhere in that room, there is a version of this story where the mission ends right there. That's indigestible. Instead, they fix it. 35 minutes later than planned, the countdown resumes. 12:05. Ignition. The first stage lights. Solid fuel, no throttle, no abort switch. Once it's burning, there is no version of this story where you take it back. Stage separation. Then the second stage. Then the third. Each one a moment where months of engineering either hold or don't. And then the part nobody outside the industry ever hears about, the kick stage. A quiet 6-minute burn that does the delicate work, nudging the payload into exactly the right orbit. 450 kilometers up. 15 minutes after ignition, it's done. 2 minutes after that, mission control gets the number they have been waiting years for. Confirmed orbit. There is a sound a room makes when years of work suddenly finally works. It's not really cheering. It's closer to relief that turned into joy halfway through. The mission director called it a complete success. One of the founders later admitted it still didn't feel real, that this was supposed to take longer, cost more, fail at least once before it worked. It didn't fail, not on the first try. On social media, the company posted 4 words: "Hello space, we have arrived." Not we launched a rocket, we arrived. I see this like a pride statement from 2 scientists signaling a path into space for the next generation. Because that's what this really was. Not just a single flight, but a company and an entire ecosystem finally showing up in a place where India's private sector had never been allowed to stand before. Here is a part that outlasts the headline. This wasn't just 2 scientists or 1 startup company's win. It was proof that an entire experiment worked. The experiment of asking whether a government could open its space program to outsiders without losing what made it work in the first place. Salute to ISRO. It handed over the infrastructure it spent 60 years building. The Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center cleared a regulatory path that didn't exist 5 years earlier, and Skyroot Aerospace, a private startup barely old enough to call itself established, delivered on the first try what usually takes state space agencies decades and multiple failures to achieve. It was a historic feat. Only 2 nations had ever done this before, not their space agencies, but private companies within them. The United States, China, and now India. For the first time, India's private sector stood shoulder to shoulder with giants, crossing a threshold that had never been opened before. This wasn't just a rocket launch, it was a declaration that India's scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs had arrived, carrying the weight of a nation's future into space. And Skyroot isn't stopping here. A bigger rocket is already in development. More flights are already planned. The real test was never whether one launch would work, it's whether an entire industry can now stand on its own. Now, not everyone agrees the story is as simple as it looks. There are real questions worth asking about who actually owns India's private space companies and about a wave of scientists who have been leaving ISRO itself over the past year. Those are fair questions and they deserve their own honest video. This one isn't that video. This one is just about what happened on July 18th and why it's worth celebrating. So keep an eye out, part 2 is coming and it's going to ask the harder questions. Now let us be honest, in our country, it's not just the farmers struggling to thrive. Even the powerful minds, our researchers, our selfless scientists have faced equal hardships, perhaps even greater ones, psychological, when there were zero funds, no support, and only belief to carry them forward. Today's generation, for example, Their worries about phones not being lent to play Firefly or PUBG, or bargains for motorbikes if they achieve a rank in school or college. Parenting itself has become a huge task. But here is the responsibility. You, the parents, must tell them these stories. Stories of scientists who carried rocket parts not on trucks, large trolleys, not highly equipped vehicles, but on bicycles and even on bullock carts. Because 60 years ago, that was the only way forward. No private path, no door, only determination. And today, a company that didn't exist a decade ago built a rocket from nothing, launched it once, and reached orbit on the very first try. This is not just a story about a rocket landing in the right place, it is the story of what happens when a nation finally decides that one player is never enough and opens the door for many more to build the future. From bicycles and bullock carts to billion-dollar rockets, India has arrived. And with it, a new generation stands ready, carrying not just machines into space, but the weight of a country's hope and the promise that science will never again be left to struggle alone. I'm Pradeep Paspleti. You're watching Third Eye. Stay healthy and stay happy.